Welcome. Good morning. My name's Lisa Campbell, and I use she, her pronouns. I serve this congregation as a member of the social justice team. I am co-leading this morning's service as worship associate. Welcome to our special place. At the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Quad Cities, we welcome all people into our beloved community of whatever age, race, class, ethnicity, physical ability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or religious background. We welcome you, especially those joining us for the first time. We live stream our services on YouTube, and our recordings are then saved in our YouTube channel. If you want to appear in our recordings, you may sit under the owl's nest by the bookshelves. We invite everyone to join us downstairs after service for coffee, snacks, and conversations. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. I'm Lori McCollum, and I use she, her pronouns. We open our service today with a reading from Mark Nepo. It was years ago, but I remember it clearly. I was walking along the shore of a lake in the middle of the day, and there in the sun, a good 10 yards out, was a duck, curled up into itself, asleep, with its slick, tufted head tucked into its body. It bobbed peacefully in the lapping of the water. This little scene undid me, for here was an ultimate lesson in trust. Without any intent or knowledge of itself, this little duck, asleep in the womb of the world, was a keen and wordless teacher. It was obvious that the duck would wake and swim its little patterns in the water, but this little creature's ability to let go so completely allowed its time on earth to be filled and saturated, if just for a few minutes, with a depth of peace that only surrender can open to us. Only rarely have I let this completely go and have a moment of total surrender. This has thoroughly changed my life. When lonely and afraid to reach out, I have somehow collapsed repeatedly into the ocean of another's love, and it has cleansed my weary heart. And in my search now for wisdom to live by, I stumble at times and surrender what I think I know so completely, and I find myself adrift in a deeper way that is neither wise nor unwise, but simply life-affirming. And now, as Lisa lights our chalice, let us all recite our chalice lighting words from the Reverend Scott Taylor. We gather today to hear the call of trust, though our hearts have been bruised by broken promises and dreams deferred. May we listen again for that longing to repair and be repaired, that hunger to start anew, like this flame. Trust is something that needs to be rekindled. As this is Canvas season, we will hear a brief message from Greg McGee about why he has chosen to join our congregation.
Hello, I'm Greg McGee. I've been a member here for a year-ish. I need it. Hello, I'm Greg McGee, and I've been a member here for a year-ish, and I come here for dozens of reasons, but I've decided to share 3 with you today. Ever since I was little, I've enjoyed going to church. It wasn't this one, and I always left church feeling a little less selfish than I did when I came in. And that's when I'm at my best, when I'm not feeling any better or worse than anybody else, just one of a community. Speaking of the community, I love the hugs, the handshakes, and the coffee downstairs. If I've had a good week, I can share my light with people in here. And if I've had a bad week, there's plenty of light to be shared with me. The third is sometimes our elected leaders don't create the kind of world that I want. And in here we do create the kind of world I want in many ways. And I know we're making a difference because I've followed people out of church that were trying to be marginalized by our Iowa leaders. And they've said to the Reverend, it wasn't the Reverend Sabrina, but they've said, how do you put it? But that he thanked him for this welcoming space because the Iowa elected leaders were trying to make it hard for them to exist. I think this is somewhat tied to pledging, so I'm happy to spend a little bit of my income helping my spiritual home keep the lights on. And whenever I've done work with people in the church, whether it be picking up sticks in the yard or volunteering at Pride Fest, I've really enjoyed that work and I've really enjoyed the people. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg. Please rise in body or spirit for our opening song, number 298 in the gray hymnal, Wake Now, My Senses. The lyrics will also be projected on the monitor. Please remain lifted up. In the spirit of love and fellowship, we now greet in the holy in our midst by briefly greeting those around us, especially those we don't know.
She was here a second ago.
You sit so you can see the book. Uh-huh. My goodness. Good morning, everyone. I need to move the mic closer. I seem to have a growth on my foot. But she did color a beautiful picture. Her and Stella worked on this together. This is one of our values, justice. And today downstairs, we're going to be talking about justice in a couple of ways. Our younger kids are going to be talking about this book, which I'll read to you now. And our older kids are going to be talking about justice for animals and how to help the dogs and cats in our area. And during coffee hour today, they will be collecting donations for the Books and Meows Cat Cafe. So if anyone has any cash on them and would like to donate to keep some cats off the streets. All right. You ready for this book? Can I have some space, please? At least my children love me. Speak up, Molly Lou Mellon. Molly Lou Mellon was a tiny girl with big, deep down heart. Her mom always told her, be true to yourself. And that's what we're talking about upstairs today, too. So she was. Molly Lou Mellon tried to do the right things in her life. It didn't always work. Her mom always told her, take responsibility for things that you do, good or bad. So she did. Molly Lou Mellon had friends of all shapes, sizes, opinions, and ideas. Kind of like our friends at church, right? Her mom always told her, accept people for who they are and listen to their ideas, even if they are different from yours. So she did. Molly Lou Mellon had a loud voice, and she chatted, jabbered, and gabbed all the time with her friends. Her mom always told her, "You have a strong voice. Use it to speak up for anyone who might need your help." So she did. See, she's telling her mom to help the dog. In the fall, Molly Lou Mellon started school again with a big yellow backpack and a huge toothy smile for all her friends. She sat with Ronald Durkin and Gertie in the front row of their classroom. Bettina Bunklehead snickered at them and cooed, "Molly Lou and Ronald, kissy boyfriend, girlfriend." Is that very nice? No. Molly Lou Mellon stood up and told her, "We are friends." Then she exchanged a special handshake with Gertie and Ronald. See, she stood up to the bullies. In the winter, Molly Lou Mellon had to be project partners with Bettina Bunklehead. They accidentally painted all over the desks and not on their papers. Oh, they accidentally. It was a little fun. When the teacher asked who did it, Molly Lou Mellon said, "Me," and had to spend recess cleaning the desks. See, she took responsibility, right? Bettina said nothing and played a great game of pirate outside. But remember, we always do the right thing, even if the people around us aren't, right? Molly Lou Mellon was mad at first, but then she played her own thrilling game of swabbing the decks. In the spring, a new boy named Gavin Grape started school. He was small, he wore glasses, and his ears stuck out. He told the class all about Newton's law of gravity in a long speech at the front of the room. Bettina Bunklehead rolled her eyes, sneered at Gavin, and said, "Big deal," really loudly. Gavin's cheeks turned bright red, and he hung his head. Well, what do you think Molly's gonna do? Yeah. Molly Lou Mellon raised her hand and said, "Yes, gravity is a big deal." Then she scribbled a little note and handed it to Gavin. It read, "Welcome to our school. Nice speech. Join us on the playground at recess." On the first day of summer, Bettina Bunklehead showed up at camp and promptly stuck her foot out, tripping Gavin Grape. He crashed to the ground and his glasses went flying. Bettina grinned and chirped, "Smarty pants, looks like gravity got you." Oh, that's not very nice. Molly Lou Mellon caught Gavin's glasses in midair and went nose to nose with Bettina and said, "You must never do anything like that again, my friend. Friends stand up for one another." Yep. So now we're going to go downstairs and learn more about how to stand up for our friends, right?
Good morning. I'm Andrea Gilman, and I'm a member of the Pastoral Care Associates Ministry team. As we gather today, we pause to reflect on what lies in our hearts. In this time of sharing, we take a moment to recognize our personal joys and concerns and to read from the book of Joys and Concerns those personal life events that you have chosen to share with us. Do we have any concerns from the online viewers? No. Thank you. And from Laura Nichols, hoping for steady hands for my surgery this week and for a smooth recovery. I'm going to share a sorrow of mine in that I have been absent for too long. I have 2 family members that are in hospice, one that is not expected to make it through the weekend, and I have a cousin that just passed away yesterday after an extended illness. So please hold my family in your hearts. And do we have any online joys to celebrate? No. Thank you. And to Andrew Zizkinkt, is that right? Celebrating 15 years of marriage with Ashley. And for anybody who is from Rock Island, a joy of mine is that we have a school board election coming up for Rock Island, Myland, and I'm going full force to see if I can't be one of the new board members. Thank you. For what has been shared and for what remains in the quiet sanctuary of our hearts, we are grateful. Let us become aware of the energy that brings us together in beloved community. As we share a time of silent meditation, may we open our minds and hearts to a place of quiet, to a silent prayer for the healing of pain and the comfort of love. Following, you are invited to come forward and light a candle during the musical meditation that follows. Thank you.
This congregation is a theologically diverse religious community with membership open to all who are in accord with our values, mission, and vision. Our congregation is entirely self-governed by the democratic process. One of the privileges of our free church tradition is to provide all of the financial support for our many ministries. From among ourselves, generosity, therefore, is one of the spiritual values we recognize as central to our personal and institutional well-being. This month's undersigned plate offering will go towards our own UUCQC project, The Giving Garden. We invite you now to participate in the blessing of giving as the ushers come among you to accept the gifts of the congregation. Please be as generous as you can. For all the gifts of time and treasure that you give to this congregation, with sincere gratitude, we thank you. Please rise in body or in spirit for a responsive reading as displayed on the monitor, Growing Trust by Rosemary Watola Tromer. Now, since I've tasted trust in life, why would I ever slip again into armor? Fallen in love with life, a time when they might be possible. And this strange fact alone seems enough to remind me to cast wide my arms. You may be seated for the reflection.
Good morning again. Let's see here. Got to get the right page. I'm going to be talking this morning about self-trust. This is kind of a vague concept, but I think it's an important one. We're going to explore it today, and I'm going to ask you to participate a little bit, but don't panic. I'm not going to ask you to do anything hard or separate into dyads or anything like that. But before we get very far, first I'm going to talk about trust in a way that I think makes the most sense to everybody. I'm going to talk about you trusting others, because we're more familiar with that. I want each of you to take a moment and think about someone who you trust. Who do you find most trustworthy in your life, and why do you trust that person? Think of one or two adjectives to describe them. And then maybe even recall an event that built trust between you. And I want you to hold on to those words or memories, because I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes. I'm guessing that you thought of words like consistency, integrity, honesty, reliability, words that reflect a history of them doing what they say they're going to do, doing things that were helpful and caring to you, that you have some sort of commonality with them so you know they understand you. They took the time and effort to invest something in you. And like most things, it's not all or nothing. Even your top trust person isn't perfect. They may have broken your trust a few times, but it was probably about smaller things, or it didn't happen often. I'm guessing that they found ways to make amends for any mistake they made, and then if you watched as they actually made up the changes that they promised to make, your trust level would build back up over time. But if they kept making the same mistake over and over, your trust in them would degrade over time. So now let's return to my initial question. What is self-trust? Well, it's much the same thing. How well do you know yourself? Do you keep your promises? Are you congruent? Does your behavior match your intention? Do you make amends when you mess up? Because trust is critical in many ways. Any of you who took psychology classes in high school or college might recall that one of the most important things that happens in infancy and early childhood is the development of basic trust. People who lack trust in adult figures and from their childhood really struggle with trusting others and themselves when they grow up. It's one of the most important building blocks for identity development, as well as for developing relationships with others. We can't really trust others until we trust ourselves. And you can't really trust yourself until you trust others. It's this big circle. And you might be saying, so why are we talking about this in church? How is this related to spirituality or religion? Well, UUism is not a doctrinally based religion with a prescribed set of beliefs. We're a covenantal religion, which means we try to live in covenant with one another. We are a group of people who share a vision and purpose, and we agree to follow a set of values. And that means we have to trust one another. We are a group of people who come together and make our best attempts to follow our values. And if we break our promises to one another, we agree to try to make amends. So, trusting yourself, trusting others, trust within this congregation is all interrelated. I want to touch for a moment on the major religions for a moment and what they say about self-trust. In the Old Testament, Proverbs 28:26, they say, "Whoever trusts in his own mind is a fool, but he who walks in wisdom will be delivered." But then in Ephesians 2:8, I read, "It is not a sin to believe in yourself." The Quran says that whosoever trusts in himself will be betrayed many times, but then also says to recognize your strengths and use them to contribute to the greater good. The greater good, a concept we don't hear as often these days. Buddhism encourages self-trust by developing self-compassion, self-love, mindfulness meditation, but also says that the sense of self is an illusion and that the absence of self is the ultimate truth. Well, now I'm confused. The religions didn't tell us very much to make clear what direction to go. So what does the secular world say? Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Self-trust is the first secret to success." He also famously said, "Trust thyself. Every heart vibrates to that iron string. The only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be." Isaac Newton, "When you trust yourself, you trust the wisdom that created you." Maya Angelou, "I don't trust people who don't trust themselves. There's an African saying which is, be careful when a naked person offers you a shirt." I really like that one. I'm not sure I know what it means, but I really like that one. Or perhaps you'll follow the advice of Winnie the Pooh, who said, "You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think." Psychologists say that self-trust develops from three primary things: self-awareness, behavioral integrity, and self-care. In other words, know yourself, follow through on your intentions, and take care of yourself. So we're going to talk about each of those for just a bit. First, let's talk about self-awareness. When I visualize a person with high levels of self-trust and self-awareness, Simone Biles comes to mind. First of all, I can't imagine performing anything in front of millions of people, but particularly not a set of skills that involves propelling your body through space, spinning, flying, leaping, and coming down to stick the landing. She's not only able to trust herself to excel at those skills, but during the 2021 Olympics in Tokyo, she was able to trust herself enough to make the decision to withdraw from the competition because she had the twisties. And she knew she would be endangering her body and possibly her life if she continued. The only thing I can imagine that would be worse than performing in front of millions of people is admitting to millions of people that you're anxious and suffering from a health problem that probably none of them have ever heard of. The second mechanism that helps develop self-trust is your ability to follow through on your intentions, what psychologists call behavioral integrity. It's kind of like those annual resolutions you make in January, only you're supposed to actually do them. I'm so impressed when I read about people who get up at 4:30 or 5 every morning and exercise. Occasionally on January 1st, I think I should try that. But I know I'm not going to do that because I just don't want to get up that early. But I could make the resolution to have a regular time to exercise most days that I can make myself do, like 4:30 or 5 p.m. So here, both things happen. I know myself well enough to set a goal I believe I'm willing to do, and I can make myself do it most of the time. Every time I work toward this goal, I learn I can trust myself. And when I fail to follow through and I mess up, and I will, I have a plan to brush myself off and get back on the horse tomorrow. This builds the muscle of self-discipline, which leads to self-trust. The final component for building self-trust is self-compassion, which can include things like positive self-talk. Do you build yourself up or break yourself down? Doing things to take care of yourself, which for me often includes being outdoors or chocolate. You can't rely on your body, your mind, or your spirit if you're exhausted or worn to a frazzle, as my mother would say. When I used to talk about self-care with clients, I used to give the example of the oxygen mask on a plane. The cabin attendant tells you that in case of a loss of cabin pressure, your oxygen mask will drop down, and if you're traveling with small children, you should secure your own mask first before ensuring the safety of your children. Now, why? Isn't that selfish? No, because you can't help them if you're unconscious on the floor. The same is true in life. Self-care is essential, both for you and for those you care about. In a previous reflection, I told you a story about my father, and in thinking about this topic, another example of him came to mind that I think reflects all three mechanisms. My dad was in the Army during World War II. He didn't talk a lot about the war, but he told some stories that really stuck with me. He had an essential job at home, working as a truck driver delivering milk to a local cheese factory, so they didn't draft him right away. But by the time he was drafted, in 1944, he was 34 years old. Because he was older, and probably because he had previous hunting experience, he quickly moved up the ranks to sergeant before shipping out to the European theater. He ended up in Italy and was placed in a platoon that had been in active combat for some time. He was then assigned to a squad that had lost a lot of their men. There he was, totally inexperienced in combat, but the ranking non-com and the oldest guy there. He asked the squad who had been their leader in the last few weeks, and when that man raised his hand, he said, "You're still in charge until I know what I'm doing, because you've gotten them this far." He had enough self-awareness to know what he wasn't ready for yet, enough self-care to be cautious and vigilant, and enough behavioral integrity to do what he said he would do, and he took over after a week or two. This story made an impression on me as a child because it was a startling example of an adult admitting to being unprepared or even afraid. Yet even as a child, I recognized this behavior as a strength. Now, let's talk a bit about the downside of self-trust. Sometimes there are reasons not to trust yourself. According to psychologist Nick Wignall from the University of Dallas, the trust you are placing in yourself can be derailed by dwelling in the past, worrying too much about the future, over-relying on your emotions, or ignoring your true passion. An example of over-relying on your emotions comes to mind in my own life. When I was a teenager, I relied mostly on my gut, my emotions, to make all of my decisions, which at 16 is often pretty stupid. I chose my college based on refusing the ones my mom suggested because clearly she was just trying to control me. I chose my high school boyfriend for much the same reason, and neither of those worked out very well, at least not as I planned. I failed to develop much self-trust early on. What about being stuck in the past, worrying about the future, or ignoring your true passion? I can think of an example that touches on all of those, the film Good Will Hunting. I don't know how many of you have seen that. Will has a genius-level IQ, but he chooses to work as a janitor at MIT. When he solves a difficult graduate-level math problem, he's discovered by a professor, and chaos ensues. Abandonment by his parents and a history of abuse and neglect in foster care led to feelings of shame, poor self-control, and an inability to form healthy relationships. The film suggests that when Will begins to accept his fear of the unknown and allows himself to follow his passion, he's able to grow as a person and let go of the past and develop self-trust. The UU minister, the Reverend Dr. Sandra Fees, writes about trusting yourself and says, "A fundamental question I have been grappling with is this: how can any of us trust ourselves when we have insider knowledge that we've gotten it wrong so many times?" She cautions us that the point of trusting yourself isn't to get it right all the time. This is where we sometimes get self-trust most wrong. After a series of slip-ups, self-doubt and shame can take over. Human beings can be awfully hard on themselves. Self-confidence and a sense of self-worth can get eroded, leaving people second-guessing themselves. Rather than being about getting it right every time, what if trusting oneself has to do with the ability to bounce back, to be resilient, to overcome the slip-up or the failure? Just stop for a moment to think about it. None of us is going to get things right every single time, no one. Trusting oneself has to do with believing that we can find a way to be okay even when we get it wrong. It has to do with having the courage to learn, to grow, to change, and to trust again. Like the psychologist, she believes that knowing of self builds trust because self-knowledge brings an appreciation for and recognition of strengths, weaknesses, and biases. There's tremendous power in that knowledge. She states, to know oneself is to discover what leads to happiness and wholeness, to discern what empowers us as agents of our own lives, and to learn how to be meaningful contributors to the world. To know oneself is to tap into that deep well of the soul. To go inward is to connect more deeply to self and also to the divine, should you believe in such, and can also lead to deeper connections with others. Time-honored traditions such as meditation and prayer, done alone or with others, can build self-trust. One reason we gather in religious community is to encourage each other on our spiritual journeys. Our liberal religion calls us to be lamps unto ourselves and lamps unto each other. Now, in closing, I'd like to return for a moment to those descriptors that you chose at the beginning of this reflection, the words that describe the persons in your life whom you trust. Perhaps you can try those words on and see how well they fit. Slide them on like a new pair of shoes. Which ones already fit well? Which ones need breaking in? What barriers are most likely to trip you up? Being stuck in the past, worrying too much about the future, or failing to follow your passion? Where can you seek support to help you to build your storehouse of self-awareness, behavioral integrity, and self-care? Remember, we are all here for one another. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be. And now we will extinguish the chalice. No, we're going to, I'm sorry. It's not on here. If you don't have it on here, Gates, I'm not going to say it.
Please rise in body or spirit for our closing song, number 18 in the Teal hymnal, What Wondrous Love. Their lyrics will be projected on the monitor.
please remain lifted up as we extinguish the chalice and join in the unison reading by Marilyn Robinson. Trust knits the world together. It holds our very lives together, and yet it is peculiarly liable to fraying and raveling. It is all too easily broken. It is vital yet fragile stuff.
Announcements. If you have an announcement for a Sunday service, please send it to office@uuqcqc.org by noon on Thursday before the service. We have quite a few announcements. After the service, before you go downstairs for coffee, if you have not yet completed your affirmation form and made your pledge for 25-26, we invite you to remain briefly after service to fill out your form. We will have people available to answer questions and help complete the form. This helps save our pledge drive team from having to connect with you later. Next Sunday, March 23rd, the Environmental Justice Team hosts a quarterly vegetarian potluck in the social hall after service. We hope everyone will bring a dish to share, even if you aren't a vegetarian. We would love to sample one of your salads, or perhaps a loaf of crusty bread. The hospitality team will be focusing on desserts. Moving towards a more plant-based diet is not only good for your health, but is also good for the planet. Hope to see you then. On Thursday, March 27th, St. John's Lutheran Church is once again hosting their Faith in Climate Action Summit. You are all welcome to attend either in person or on Zoom. This event is free. See Lori McCollum if you have any questions. The Property Committee will begin painting in the atrium next week. If you have any meetings scheduled in the boardroom next week, you will need to contact Nicole to reschedule a space. Jeff Danielson, our factotum, is on vacation for the next 2 weeks. Please be even more attentive than usual in cleaning up after yourself. And last, the pastoral care team would like to thank all members of the congregation who contributed toward the celebration of life service for Elaine Kresh yesterday. The outpouring of those who gave up their treasures and time, from the interior design team, the property committee, the production team, those who volunteered to be greeters, assist with setup or cleanup, those who spoke during this service, all truly made a celebration of Elaine's life. Thank you for all of giving back our love to Elaine. And I think, Alice, you have an announcement?
This is about the pledge drive, and if you've noticed, there's been a whole bunch of jigsaw puzzles. Each puzzle is worth $2,400, but who's going to multiply 2,400 times 19? I'm not. Instead, I have the amount here from what we have gained in 1 week of pledges, and I'd like Doug to come up, Greg, Lee, Sarah, Joyce. Will you come up? I need you to help me demonstrate something. I'm going to give them each a number, and I just want them to stand randomly, and we are going to place them in the how much we think we have. So, if you would all take a number and stand next to each other.
Is it this? Yeah, I guess it's this.
Oh, okay.
Arrange yourselves where you think, turn the numbers over. Why are there so many numbers? Why are there thousands of numbers?
Let's scoot up. Everybody scoot down.
We need to get rid of turn them and take you out.
Put all those zeros at the end.
Yeah, we only need 1 0. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Now stay there, Kim. There. Yeah, you're good. Oh my God. You hold up. You think in 1 week of a pledge drive that is the amount that we have raised in 1 week? Yeah. How many think that's the perfect number? Now, honest gosh, we can find that. This is the perfect number.
You did it.
You made that big switch.
And what we hope to happen is Greg move over and get behind Kurt.
Yeah, we hope this is the big one.
Hey, thank you. You take everything.
Thanks.
That was the spirit of Elaine. It just was magical. So again, please, those who have not yet filled out a form or a pledge drive, just stay. And as soon as the sanctuary is cleared, we will go through the process if you need help, and we'll double that. Thank you.
I'd like to close today with a quote from Pema Chodron. As I look out of my eyes at the world, I see that a lot of us are just running around in circles, pretending that there's ground where there is actually no ground. And that somehow, if we could learn to not be afraid of groundlessness, not be afraid of insecurity and uncertainty, it would be calling on an inner strength that would allow us to be open and free and loving and compassionate in any situation. But as long as we keep trying to scramble to get ground under our feet and avoid the uneasy feeling of groundlessness and insecurity and uncertainty and ambiguity and paradox, all of that, the wars will continue. Covenant begins with extending trust and respect. It is not based on whether or not we can prove that such trust is warranted. It is not based on the idea that we will each live out the covenant perfectly. It is based on the fact that as members, we have all accepted our covenants as an articulation of our aspirations for how we wish to be together. It is based on the idea that trust is not created individually, but instead is rooted in the idea that we are better together, that we create trust together. Go in peace. You may be seated for the postlude. You're already seated. grab all these papers. Okay.